For those of you who are new to this session, my name's Sarah Perriam and I'm the MC for the Blink Innovation Seminar Series today here at the New Zealand Agricultural Show. If you've stayed on from the last seminar, thank you very much for seeing it through. The last seminar was very much a global macro outlook for how we are going to make our mark as New Zealand Inc. And the sort of structural elements came out of that discussion around how we're going to achieve that. So I want to take time to thank the speakers from that last panel who were a part of it. This session is called Climate Smart Food Production. As our agri-food industries are facing the challenge of how we're going to produce high-value food sustainably whilst adapting and building resilience to a changing climate, we need to reduce our emissions and find the best use for our land, as well as protecting our water, animal and our social license to operate. Along the way, improving biodiversity is very much all the pieces of this very complex puzzle. And as I said earlier, we need people like Blink who bring about a neutral space for this, a safe space for connected thinking, because we have a lot of challenges that we need to think outside the square on. Before I introduce our panel, I just want to, for those of you who don't know about Blink Innovation, it is, Bruce didn't allude to earlier, but is now fully owned by Lincoln University. And it is an incubator for startups like myself, who's a tenant there, and Ross Milne, the Leafed team that were speaking earlier. But it also hold a lot of free events and very cheap events that have got some incredibly world-renowned speakers talking about the challenges that we face and what awesome things are going on in Canterbury particularly. So if you don't live in Canterbury or can't attend any of these events, could I please at least ask you to sign up to their newsletters, and you can register to get the videos on demand afterwards and be a part of this conversation that is going to take us going forward and help our farmers through this transition period. So I'm just going to run through the introductions of our next three speakers who are going to present for 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a panel here with roving mics. I ask questions for a living. I don't want to be asking all the questions, so please ensure that you put your hand up, and the more challenging the question, the better. There is no stupid question. So I'd like to first introduce to the panel Alan Lim of Jade Garden. He owns with his wife Jade Garden Produce, and also the majority shareholders in Island Horticulture. The former is a 110-hectare outdoor market garden in the Selwyn district, and the latter is South Island's largest cucumber growing operation. Alan, mine died. I need some help, actually, so very interesting. The two companies have a combined staff of 35 full-time, former mechanical engineer by profession in the automotive assembly industry. So it'd be very interesting to hear what he brings to this discussion as a board member of Vegetable New Zealand and Canterbury Horticulture Growers Society. So welcome to the stage, Alan Lim. You can just come and take. Might need a glass house, I think. And the second presentation we have is from Seth Lawrenson from Ag Research, talking about choosing the best land use for today and tomorrow. Seth is a senior scientist and science impact leader for soil and water at Ag Research, with a background in soil and water dynamics, particularly as it relates to irrigation and water movement in soils. He gained his PhD in soil science from the University of South Australia, where he investigated the impact of saline irrigation use in vineyards. At Ag Research, Seth is working on focusing on the physical health of soils under our pastoral grazing systems and how farmers can mitigate against contaminant losses from critical source areas and vulnerable landscapes. Welcome to the stage, Seth. And if you wouldn't just, if you bear with me for 2 seconds in this technological advanced world, I go to my phone to find the bio of our last presenter, Juliet Maitland from Sinlay, who's talking about securing environmental and economic sustainability. Juliet started her journey in the sector in an extension role for dairy, spent 4 years getting to grips with dairy farm systems in Canterbury and learning as much as she could from farmers with the science. What she discovered from them farming in Canterbury was actually about managing people. She's seen lots of opportunities to help farmers in this area transitioning she has transitioned now into a development role, coaching and training farmers on techniques to improve productivity through people and stronger business acumen. So we welcome to the stage Juliet Maitland. We have a wonderful, diverse range of presenters, and I'd like to kick it off with Alan Lim.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a vegetable grower. My operation is out by Lincoln, 110 hectares, and a third of that is actually leased. Now, I'm also involved in the hothouse business, growing cucumbers out by North Canterbury. Now, today I've been asked to share some facts and figures with you on water quality and how it's evolved in Canterbury in the time that I've been with the Zone Committee. So I joined the Zone Committee in 2014. 2014, 2019, well, there's only 5 years. There's not a lot of time, to kind of establish any kind of trend. But the facts and figures that I've got from ECAN is pretty much what I expected. From earlier modelling that was done for Selwyn Waihoura Plan Change 1, we did not expect to see any improvement in groundwater quality for at least a couple of decades. So we've always kind of said it was actually going to get worse before it gets better, because the nitrates are in the post, so to speak. It's just coming down the plains towards us, and that takes a long time. So in terms of nitrates, 47% of Canterbury's monitored sites are still degrading, 34% improving, and 19% staying the same. In the Selwyn district, where I come from, those numbers are about 50 degrading, 30% improving, and 20% staying the same. For dissolved reactive phosphorus, things are looking a bit better for Canterbury, with about 36% degrading, and 39% improving, and about 26% no change. Selwyn's doing far better than the others in this area, with only 13% degrading and about 87% that's actually improving. So for groundwater, Ashburton has it's probably one of the worst. 13 of its 52 monitored sites, monitored wells, I should say, which exceeds the maximum allowable or acceptable value of 11.3 milligrams per litre. Selwyn has 4 out of 61 that are over, and Christchurch has none, so Christchurch water is not bad. Now, in general, though, the nitrate concentrations are lower around the margins of Lake Te Waihora and also adjacent to alpine rivers, but higher in the mid-plains away from any rivers. So those figures don't sound great, but I know that there are a number of farmers that have already met their 30% in reduction targets as required by Selwyn Waihoura Plan Change 1. One farmer I spoke to a few days ago told me that they had reduced their in-leaching by 51%. So I'm quietly confident that we're actually heading in the right direction. So it'd be interesting to revisit these numbers in about 5 years' time, or in a few years' time. So let's talk about my approach to freshwater management at my place. So my approach is actually very, very simple. If I can put it in terms of an equation, it'd be like A minus B equals C, that kind of thing. So where, A would be my inputs. If I'm talking about just water management, I guess inputs here that are important probably be nutrients, in terms of fertiliser and water. So to minimise that, it would be just a simple soil test, get a recommendation of what I should put in water, I guess, measure the moisture, and also work out, what you need to put in. So watering is just an input that I can minimise, but what I'm using at the moment, though, is still things like K-line, travelling irrigators with boom. I guess most of my travelling irrigators have got computers that control the speed so that I can put the right amount on. I do still use big travelling irrigators, with guns for broad acre crops like peas and tall crops like sweet corn, where some of those other methods don't really work very well. So in terms of maximising the output then, because if you got a certain amount of input, you want to take as much off the farm as possible. So the way I do that, I guess it's kind of sounds pretty simple as well, really. I guess it's just about looking after your crops and making sure that they perform and that everything that you grow and produce goes out to the farm gate. So there's not actually much left behind to then be lost to the atmosphere or to the water down below. Now, I've also been asked to comment on what growers could consider when reviewing their own freshwater management practice. I think we actually need to revisit the whole vegetable farming system that we've inherited. Traditionally, most vegetables are grown on beds that are 1.5 metres wide, and most of the time you get 2 rows of, whether it would be Brussels sprouts, cabbages, cauliflowers, broccoli, leeks, silver beet, sweet corn, just down that bed, mostly 2 rows. Now, I think it was actually done that way because back then a lot of the farms are quite a bit smaller, and so you might only have 1 tractor or maybe 2, but then you have the implements that will fit in the back of that, and they do multiple things. So the one planter will plant all those things, but you just vary the intra-row or the plant spacing, between the row, and so you use the same planter. And we also used to use a grubber to do the mechanical weeding. So a lot of that's gone now, so there's probably a lot more flexibility in what you can actually do. So what I've done is, I guess when I first kind of thought about it, I thought that the rows are probably too wide for some crops, especially things like leeks or something like that, because it's planted about 750 millimetres apart, and really I don't think the roots kind of reach the middle, but yet, fertilisers kind of spread, just spread there, and then it probably would just leach through because the plants are not using it all. So what I've done is actually increase the planting density in a number of my crops, like silver beet, pak choy, spring onions, and with actually no increase in the amount of fertiliser. And I tried that, and actually it seems to work. So what I've done is actually virtually double the plant density. And if you think that I haven't actually kind of increased the amount of fertiliser I used, you'd probably be thinking that I must have used too much in the first place, before I made that change. Well, I did get the soil test done, and I did get a recommendation, so it must have been roughly right, and it didn't look like it was overgrown or anything. But the other change that I made at the same time, though, was actually to place my fertiliser by the plants, by banding the fertiliser or just dropping it so that it's actually on the bed and not on the tracks. So that's kind of effectively increased the fertiliser that's available to the plants by about 25%. And 25% increase in fertiliser with a corresponding increase, no, not corresponding increase, with about 70-80% increase in yield. So that's good bang for buck, I thought. So I guess by the same logic, when I was talking about the equation before, A minus B equals C, because for the same amount of nutrients, I've got a lot more output. I figure that the in-leaching must be a lot less. Not that overseer can actually kind of tell me that, because the experts tell me that it's next to impossible to model my kind of operation in overseer. So other growers have kind of done something similar as well. So what they've done is they might have increased their bed spacing by about 20%, from 1.5 metres to 1.8, and then by doing that, they can actually add in another row. So production-wise, they would have increased their production by 50%. And one grower has gone as wide as 2.4 to reduce the wheel marks on his farm. Now, I haven't done this for broccoli, cabbages, or cauliflowers, mostly because I haven't got the funds to kind of change my whole farming system. It will mean new tractors, new implements, new everything. So it just has to wait. I guess I'm also hoping that the supermarkets actually might change some of their specifications, because I can't actually just kind of go and increase the number of rows all the time for all the crops, because they do have a minimum size for things like, just about everything really. Cabbages, as an example, cabbage has to be 190 millimeters in diameter to maximum of 240. And once you cut it, then it's got to be 170 to 220. So they have those kind of specifications. But if they remove that, then I can grow smaller cabbages. If I grow smaller cabbages, I then don't have to cut them and wrap them in plastic, which will solve another problem. I just want to make a quick comment about my cucumber growing operation. So we've only taken over that place probably just over a year ago, so there's a lot of stuff that I actually want to do, but again, it comes back to the amount of money that's available to do those things. As it is at the moment, we're not recycling some of the nutrients. Some houses are being recycled. It's true hydroponics. It goes round and round and round. But there are kind of more modern methods there where the nutrients aren't actually being recycled, but we are looking to do that. The last one I want to talk about is the challenges that might help each other, or that we could, that could help each other, through all this. And I mentioned investment as being one of the major ones. I think you need investment to increase, or to invest in technology to increase the efficiency, and research to increase the know-how, because at the moment, most of the vegetable seeds bred to look nice on the supermarket shelf, and also to last longer in the supermarket shelf. And I think we also need to consider, or to give careful consideration to policies to encourage innovation rather than be so prescriptive that it doesn't actually allow you to do anything. Now, I know there's quite a few ECAN councillors in the room, and they'll probably know about it. There's Plan Change 7, which is coming through, and part of the reason for that one is actually because vegetables got caught up in the Salmahora Plan Change 1, and there was an unintended consequence there. So, I think policy-wise, I think we need to be flexible. We want it to be flexible so that we can actually change policies quicker and encourage innovation. I think that's probably about as much as I got to say. So, if there's any questions, we can deal with that later.
Thank you, Alan. I've certainly written down quite a few as well. And our next speaker is Seth Lawrenson from Agri-Research.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, thank you. So I guess I'm just going to give a few thoughts off the top of my head, but I think the three main points I want to try and put across is, in some areas, I think land use change is a suitable option. I don't think in all areas land use change is an option or a suitable option. I think those processes need to involve a wider set of interests in the solutions that they are trying to find. And in that, I mean communities and wider people that have an interest in those landscapes. As well as, the final point is, I think we should acknowledge the complexity of those decisions and of those processes. And I'm not going to stand up here and give answers to that. I've been asked to come here and give a description of a way that we are approaching it at the moment in a proof of concept way, but hopefully this type of approach is one potential tool that's useful. So I think it's quite obvious, and I'm not going to go into it, that there's a lot of pressures on land owners. Whether they're vegetable or whether they're horticultural or whether they're pastoral. And at the moment, they're largely centered around environmental issues, right? I think a lot of the issues that are arising are because we are trying to do particular activities in places that they're not particularly suitable. And trying to find solutions in those situations is one of the things we've been focusing on. I think there's another component to that that addresses how we improve management of existing systems to reach a threshold that we require. I think that's a slightly separate issue, but linked. As well as, I think, adding to the complexity of that situation is a need for those decisions to accommodate a wider set of values. So in my mind, I think we're moving beyond landscapes that produce food alone. I think we now need to start thinking about the other values that people want from those landscapes. And that might be the provision of good water, but it may also be, I want to ride my mountain bike in that forest, or I want to see from my window a view that I desire, right? I think that those types of values need to come into these discussions, and they really are adding to the complexity of the solutions that we're trying to seek or trying to find. So one of the ways that we've been approaching this issue is to try and bring together a lot of the tools and information that we have, and I think I'll put my hand down on the counter and say I don't think science has had a very has been very good at this in the past. I don't think we've been very good at bringing in all the tools and the information that we have and being able to synthesize that information to provide simple solutions. I think we have a particular tool that does one thing, a particular tool that does another thing, and particular knowledge sources that we go to for another solution. What we need to get to is a point where we can say, all right, the solutions that we're trying to find influence this property here, but simultaneously they influence that property there. So how do we bring this information together so we can understand trade-offs between doing this and an outcome here? If I have a paddock 52, and it loses a lot of sediment, I'm going to do one thing, right? It may be plant trees, or it may be, let's stick with plant trees because I can't think of anything else. And we plant trees there, right? We've solved the sediment issue. Does that lead to a different issue? Does that lead to more nitrogen, or more tilling of soils, or more something else that we didn't actually envisage when we were trying to solve the one problem? So that's the reason why I think we need to bring a lot of this information together with the aim of providing solutions. What we've been working on of late, and it's we're taking quite an innovative approach to the way that we're doing this particular bit of science. We've had quite a good sum of money, but quite short time frames to develop up a proof of concept, and that proof of concept aims to bring in a number of different models that are ultimately able to talk to each other into a framework. And the framework then has a particular front to it that enables the person to interact with that. And to build that interactive front, we've teamed up with Animation Research Limited down in Dunedin, and they're the guys that produce those lines on the America's Cup, the yachting. Sort of Dennis Connor's coming around, not Dennis Connor, somebody more recent. Anyway, I can't think of one. But anyway, so they're the guys that sort of do animation, and yep, they do animation. But essentially, what their claim to fame is finding visual means to portray information, right? And so we've been teaming up with them to build this interface where farmers can actually go into their property and move objects around, allow new land uses to be scenario tested, and understand the consequences of their actions. And so essentially, I'm not needing to go into Overseer and set up models of blocks. I'm not needing to go into somewhere else to build this. Essentially, I can interact with the models by, gaming on that. My kids think gaming means Minecraft. It kind of is because it's interactive like that. There's no guns or things that you need to shoot. We could put ducks in, actually. That would be quite a good idea. I just thought of that, sorry. But anyway, so there's none of that. But essentially, it's trying to use that type of technology to enable the interaction that we require, right? Why do we do that? I think it's simple. It sums up complexity. It allows us to expose the models and allow people to use the models and do that. But also it allows people to understand what that future might look like. We're trying to get this interface to look like my farm. It actually has my shed. It actually has my house. We're not there yet. We've got pictures of my shed and my house, but they're sort of a bit more 2D. We're trying to get them a bit more 3D. But it enables me to understand what it looks like. Actually, I didn't think about that when I thought I would plant trees there. I can't see the lambs in that paddock that I want to from my truck. That's not a good idea. I can start thinking about questions that I would not have otherwise asked myself if I can see that future, right? But also, it's allowing people to play around and to think about, actually, we've got 18 different land uses in there now. We can put tourism, we will be in, by January, we will be able to put tourism into this model and say, actually, if I did put a B&B or a Airbnb in there, what does that look like? And how does that actually affect my farm profit? Am I better off doing that than trying to graze a critical source area that's actually contributing 80% of my sediment? I might as well turn it into avocado trees or something else. So it allows the user to interact with that. But importantly, what it also does is it says, all right, I've developed a vision now. It's not just my farm. It's somebody else's farm as well. And in our land and water, we're also working on a project in our land and water, jointly with Ag Research. We're trying to work with iwi, who have a huge trust group that actually need to be convinced about the avocado trees in paddock 52. They actually need to be convinced about the Airbnb in the back block. And to be able to understand, for me to create the future and then convey that future to somebody else, for them to understand, I think is also one of the key things in all of this. So that's essentially what we're doing. The bit that I think is important to acknowledge in all of this is the complexity of what I've said is very large. And I listened to Con Williams talk about, okay, you want to grow apple trees, put the apple trees in. Actually, what's the cost of growing an apple tree? And actually, who are you going to sell the apple trees to? We're not there yet. But essentially, we are here trying to get to there in ways that are a bit more comprehensible for people. I sat on a zone committee in the Waimak, and my experience with that is that the guy from the kayaking club would come, the guy from the bowling club would come. The council would come up and say, here's the nitrogen figures for this catchment, and here's the biodiversity figures for that catchment. It was so hard for those people to understand what was going on that they didn't actually come back for the second meeting, and they lost their voice in the outcome of that catchment. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. We're doing farms now, we'll shift to catchments eventually. So thank you. You're standing up, Sarah, so I'm standing down.
You could have kept going for another half an hour and entertained me, Seth, so it was certainly not anything to do with your topic. It's extremely interesting. Now, Over the past year, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but I've been on tour with my sister Ellie Perriam's Will to Live Rural Mental Health campaign, and we've travelled to 17 places around the country. The reason I'm just saying that is one of my biggest learnings that we need to continue to remind ourselves through all the uncertainty that is there at farming is that there is humans at the centre of this, and that to motivate change we actually need to be talking to, realise we're talking to human beings. And so, and briefly just reading your profile then, Juliet, I'm looking forward to how Synlait have motivated and inspired farmers to see the incentive for environmental challenges and how you've been able to manage people through that. So Juliet Maitland from Synlait.
Alrighty, so I know that duck shooting's been alluded to already, but my brief was about there's no silver bullet, there's just a whole bunch of silver pellets, and I think it's quite fitting because you're more likely to hit the target with a shotgun rather than a 22. So basically my theme of the discussion, the 10 minutes I've got, is about balancing sustainable outcomes with sustainable practices and getting a feel for how we've started to do that at Synlait. So my role at Synlait, I look after the South Island milk supply operations. So that's from sort of a milk supply perspective across our sites, but also in terms of some of the strategic thinking around our best on-farm management practice program, which is Lead with Pride. So just a little bit about Synlait for those of you who are unfamiliar with us. We're an integrated infant formula company. We're the biggest in New Zealand at doing that. We currently operate across 6 sites, both nationally and internationally. And in the past 12 months, among a few other things, we've built North Island infant site. We've also acquired a cheese plant down at Talbot Forest, along with the brand in Temuka, and we've commissioned a new liquid milk plant facility in Dunsandel. So we're a listed company, and we've got 260 milk suppliers who supply differentiated milk to us, and we stream that through our processing plants in both the North and the South Islands. So doing milk differently for a healthier world, that's our purpose, and to me that really sums up what I'm going to talk about. We believe that the future and the vision for a healthier world requires both transformational change, which has already been talked about in terms of land use, as well as incremental change in farm practices and refining farm management practices. The approach that individual farmers choose to take is their own decision to make, and our role is about supporting them the best we can and brokering and collaborating with industry to allow that to happen and to strengthen that support. We've intentionally focused on rewarding changes in behaviour, and that's a strategy primarily to get farmer confidence up. So making the first few changes on your farm is the hardest bit, and stepping outside of what you know is really uncomfortable. So if we can incentivise farmers to make a start, it can only be a good thing. Our aim is really to build a trusted relationship with our farmers and generate as much confidence and competence on the farm as possible. If you want to be truly sustainable, you have to cultivate it at the source, so it grows in the right place. Synlait started as a farming company, so farming's in our DNA. It was important to us not to lose sight of the practical implementation of any sustainability objectives that we had. We also wanted to ensure that we were set up from the start in a way that could reward farmers for value added behind the farm gate, and that's where the unique milk streaming ability fits into our system. It allows us to meet the rapidly changing demands of our customers in the marketplace. Because of this ability to stream milk, we're able to pioneer a new program, Lead with Pride, which was launched in 2013 after about 3 years of development. It was different, it was bold, and it was a significant amount of investment without any guarantee of a customer in the market that was prepared to pay a premium. We simply just knew we had to give it a crack. It was the right thing to do. It was to protect our future, but it was also to protect the future of our farmers that supplied us. Lead with Pride is ultimately a voluntary program, and if you meet the high standard, you get rewarded for it, and that's paid on a kilo of milk solids basis. The road to certification is almost as important as the certification itself. It's a bit like the old saying, it's about the journey, not the destination. For many farmers, it's a transformational change in the way that they're doing things on their farm. So it's really important that we work at a pace that suits them. This thing can take anywhere between a couple of months and a couple of years for farmers to nail down. The program itself split into 4 areas. Farmers can't pick and choose components of it. It's a holistic approach. It doesn't compartmentalise things, and we really believe that it's important to recognise the synergies across a truly healthy farm business. Each pillar has elements of compliance, best practice and leading practice. This puts everybody in what we like to call the sweet spot, where we can optimise returns for the farmer based on good science and what we know generates a return, and also provides certainty to customers and can prove an ethical and sustainable supply chain. So social responsibility is the first component. The fundamental truth is that without people, none of us have a business. We need engaged, skilled, passionate people on the farm to help implement any new practices that we need. The pillar is all about setting your team up for success, acknowledging that without building robust systems, creating sustained farm practice change is almost a moot point. Ultimately, we're striving to provide farmers with the tools to have engaged teams that feel valued and are kept safe. It looks at everything from accommodation all the way through to performance and development conversations, so it's very broad in terms of the scope. Environment is the next pillar, and there's a commitment to farming in the context of limits, and everybody in Canterbury and other regions knows about the importance of that. So we're really looking at efficient monitoring and management of natural resources. The infrastructure needs to meet a really high standard for this area, and if people are going to need to spend capital for the program, this is often where we see it. We can dig deeper into healthier farming practices, looking at nutrients, soil, water, biodiversity, and lately really looking at greenhouse gases and mitigations. Animal health and welfare is where we see a great deal of passion from our farmers. A healthy, happy, content cow is a great prospect, great proposition for a farmer. They know how important that is. So farmers are often doing things really well in this space, and what we actually focus on here is helping them with the ability to prove and record keep in that area. It focuses on data collection and benchmarking, and it's a pillar that uses animal-centric measures, essentially, so looking at things like lameness, body condition score, and mastitis. There's a really huge component in there on stockmanship, ensuring that the entire team has the utmost empathy for the animals that are in their care. So the program really addresses every single person on the farm and their interaction with those animals. Last but not least, milk quality. This is essential to the Synlait business. The quality of milk can't be improved once it's harvested from the cow. This pillar is primarily about focusing on the dairy and systems in and around the dairy, and it has a strong focus on hygiene. The standards are a really integral part of the program, and were developed through collaborative processes with industry. Where something robust has existed, we've worked hard to partner with that and not reinvent the wheel. We don't want to waste time, we don't want to duplicate stuff for our farmers, and ultimately we want to focus on innovation. The standards are reviewed a couple of times a year, and as part of that process, farmers sit in on that, so it keeps us honest. Any changes in the program are flagged with farmers nice and early, so we're talking 6 months in advance. We get to have the discussions before any auditable requirements actually come into the program. And because of the nature of the program, farmers actually know that the targets move, and I know that that's always a challenge out there, is we never know where we're going because the target's always shifting. But for us, that's not a barrier, that's actually a win. And they get involved because they know that we're going to shift the targets, and they know that we're going to be scoping on their behalf not only the market and customers, because we're lucky that we have that tight connection, but also the local environment in terms of license to farm. So they feel like we're on their side, they feel protected, and they feel like they're going to be in the know about changes. So we don't see it as a negative. Another real appeal of the approach has been farmers have a lot of audits happening on farm, and we saw a real opportunity for us to package all that up and decrease the number of compliance audits happening on farm. So when we audit farms for Lead with Pride, it is part of their FEP audit and it is part of their annual shed check. So they just have the one visit. It's quite intensive for a farmer who's new to certification. It's a couple of auditors on the farm for the majority of the day. And so in order for us to put them up for that type of audit, we do a really thorough internal support mechanism whereby that farm goes through an internal process with us so we can give them the absolute confidence that they're going to sail through. I guess just final comments, this whole thing is about changing habits. People are people and you have to work with their strengths, and we want to make sure that we're providing that support mechanism for the individuals, what they need for the particular time, scope, maturity of their operation. So the milk supply team at Synlait has a real pivotal role in providing that support. We've seen a massive growth in the program in the last 12 months, and the support that team's provided to those farmers seeking certification has been outstanding. And we also are seeing, which will be of interest to a lot of you who are working with farmers, a real change in the character and the type of farmer coming through the program. So at the start, we're able to get a few early adopters on board who were doing most of the stuff anyway and wanted to be recognised for it. The next tranche of farmers that were coming through are now the vast majority. We're sort of reaching over that bell curve. They're committed, but they're unsure at the same time. They're not feeling very competent. Their confidence is a little bit low, and they need that support, and they need us to show them the way. And that's a different type of farmer to work with than the early adopter. And I think that's a really important point, is we have to change our approach so that these guys have the best success rate. And it just doesn't happen overnight. So currently we've got half of our supply base certified. And as I say, it's been a huge effort from the milk supply team. We're also transitioning into really a farmer-led strategy around how do we make this program easier to maintain in terms of technology. So we've partnered with FarmIQ to deliver a digital software solution for record keeping, for evidence, for best farm management. It's got workflow and all the things that you need to basically run your operation with your team in your hands. So that's taking a bit of our focus at the moment. It's proving to be really useful for farmers, and again, it's that philosophy of innovation, get rid of the duplication, and try and just make as many steps forward as possible. So that's all from me. I look forward to hearing if you guys have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Juliet. I'm incredibly impressed that you've got 50% of your farmer base certified, so congratulations on all the hard work that you've done and leading the way on that. I've got a broad question to start with, and then I definitely want you to put your hand up, and there is no stupid question, so please, you've got the opportunity here of three fantastic people to pick their brains or just challenge them on their theories. My open question to all three of you is that Damien O'Connor wants to bring in an integrated farm management plan that will go across all of these different elements, and we've got a lot of opinion pieces in the rural media space around not having interconnected policies between climate change, water and in-use. There is so many crossovers that should not be in silos. If we were to have the ultimate national farm management plan for the different sectors, what would you include in it and how would it work? To you, Seth?
Well, as a starter for 10, I would include all those things that they're currently being regulated on, would be the place I would start. I also think that whatever we do put in needs to be integrated in order for us to work out how one solution might affect another solution, essentially. And I do think that that's quite an important thing that I personally haven't heard a lot of in the media.
had an NZOPIM 7As today on greenhouse gases, and one of the...
Sorry, can you guys hear at the back? You can? Cool. Sorry.
One of the points of debate, if you like, or discussion was around addressing greenhouse gases in isolation of freshwater management, basically. So I completely agree that the two are intrinsically linked, and doing something for one provides benefit for the other, I'm sure, and it's connected with the farm system. This whole thing we operate in is a biological system. So really segregating out parts is difficult, but it's also difficult to integrate them all together and provide something that's replicable across multiple operations that are all vastly different. But it's a great approach and one that I think is needed.
Alan, there's so many facets to the vegetable and horticultural industry.
I guess what I was thinking was actually, we've actually got a program that's almost like that already. It's called NZ-GAP. I didn't actually mention it earlier, but I sit on that committee as well. So it's essentially kind of similar to the Synlait Lead with Pride program, except ours has been probably in existence probably for about maybe close to 20 years now, or maybe more. Where it came from was actually it's been driven by consumers, who wanted traceability and to know that their food's actually safe. So we have been, for a long, long time, had to kind of keep records of our sprays and all that kind of stuff. And when you belong to the program, they also then can actually randomly kind of check your veggies, for sprayed residues and all sorts of other things. And now this program's actually got a fair bit of teeth. A lot of wholesalers and supermarkets now won't accept your produce unless you belong to this NZ-GAP, unless you're certified. Because it has got so much teeth, I actually think that this is actually probably an ideal vehicle or an ideal way to regulate the growers in our industry. And similar to Synlait, we also review the requirements all the time. So it's just a shame that maybe central government or regional government. I shouldn't say regional government, because ECAN has basically already approved NZ-GAP and approved as a compliance tool for the growers. And there's one particular module in there which we call the environmental management system, which when it's audited all at the same time. So again, only one auditor coming up the driveway and your requirements are met. It's quite a stringent program.
Do I have any burning questions before I keep firing them mine? Yeah.
I just on that,
Yes.
I think in order for that to happen, I think that we need to work together a lot better. I think that's one of the things that is highlighted to me, is that we do work in isolation a little bit.
Can I just ask a question then? Because one of them, off the back of that, is that the ownership over a lot of, which has created the duplication of these tools, is being created by corporates that have got a competitive advantage to sell their products. So how do you encourage collaboration for the betterment of the farmer when there's so many invested interests at play, especially in your model?
Yeah, well, short answer is I'm not sure, but I'm not the person to solve that. I think
That's a very big role.
I mean, I do think that we have people in our respective companies and in commercial companies that do these things. I don't think we're going to solve the issues of New Zealand in the way that we currently are being siloed. I do think that we're too small, and to be competitive on an international market, we actually need to get over ourselves and start working together.
That's the quote of the day, I think. Question.
Kia ora. Hello. Kia ora, Land Farm Econ Councillor. This is just a question for Juliet. You've had such, fantastic uptake from your farmers with, you said half of your supply is on board with the Lead with Pride program. Do you think it's inevitable over time that you will start requiring that of your whole supply chain, just so that you can really, sing to the masses the benefits of that program? And what kind of time frame, are you looking?
So I guess a couple of parts to answer that question is correct, it's voluntary. In our supply agreements, we've never stipulated that's a requirement. Last year we made the first changes to our supplier agreement in 10 years, and any new supply taken on in the North Island or for special milks in the South Island, farmers were given a 3-year period to become Lead with Pride certified, but that only applies to those farmers who signed those contracts. But sort of aside from the legalities and the compliance around that, probably just rethink about that bell curve and how people transition and make change is that once you actually get a decent chunk of the population operating in a particular way, the ones that start to become, say, more in the minority, start to ask more questions about how they can get involved. It's natural human behaviour to want to be part of something that's bigger than just you and your operation. And our philosophy's been around creating a movement and showing value, so it's so compelling that why wouldn't you do it? So really, we're focusing less on the stick approach, more on the carrot approach, and really hoping that, yes, Lead with Pride's given us this umbrella sort of, I guess, feeling with our customers, that's kind of the way we operate. We haven't sold it commercially yet. It's definitely in the pipeline, but we won't be operating in a way which puts a stick behind people and says, you guys must do this. Focus on making it valuable and compelling, and the people will come.
Any other questions? Do we need to put more value on our soils?
Absolutely.
And how? And how are we going to go about that? Because it's something we do not talk about enough, in my opinion. And how can we do that beyond a national policy statement? In this whole conversation around transition, because land use is a lot to do with soil structures and soil mapping and our understanding of our soils.
Such a massive topic, where
Sorry.
do you start? Yeah. So, for us vegetable growers, it's actually really, really important. Not just the soil and its ability, but it's actually got to be in the right place as well. For us, we've got to be close to population centres, got to be close to our pack houses, because we make multiple trips out to the farm and multiple trips into town as well. So, if you want it fresh, it's got to be, around town. But we've got this issue with urban encroachment. I guess you've seen it in Pukekohe, we've seen it in Rolleston. Rolleston used to be about 3 kilometres away from me, and now it's about 400 metres away from my nearest farm, and I've already lost that paddock. So, what's your question again?
You answered it beautifully, thank you.
And I think it's probably the second part of that is we've got to make it more appealing for people to invest time in when they're starting their careers. I know when I was at university, soil science, in terms of the selection of papers, wasn't right up there with animal science and plant science for some reason. It was down the other end, and the average age of the soil science professor at Lincoln University was not.
Roger's a hoot.
Yeah, and they're all great, but we got to make it a little bit more sexy for people to get involved in, because now knowing the importance that it has in the system and actually connecting people with just how vital it is, you need some people that really have some of that deep understanding and technical knowledge of it, who are working for these corporates.
Can I add
Making soil sexy. Just
Can
writing that down.
Can I add? Oh, sorry. I thought you could move on.
Carry on.
Yeah. So I'm a soil scientist. I've been asked to give a presentation at my son's school. He's 7, and it's quite nerve-wracking because you've got to kind of make it really exciting, and we do need to do that. I think the other bit to add on to this is that I do think at a catchment level we need to work out what soils are good for what. But at a catchment level, I think we need to start better understanding the services that soils provide us at a catchment level. So what are the services? So I just spent 2 weeks in Montpellier working at INRA and CRAD, and they I'm not going to profess that I understand their subsidies level, but their systems, but they are being paid to maintain soils for the wider services that they provide to the communities. And I do think that there is a lot of sense in that.
Can I just add one more thing to that as well? One of the things that horticulture and especially vegetable growing actually needs is actually crop rotation. So, we need to be able to move, into a new block of land, for the following year, because we can't really kind of grow on the same piece of land year after year. And this is true for, things like onions, potatoes, and brassicas, right? Otherwise you get all sorts of kind of soil-borne diseases. But to move around, it's actually not so easy now with all the rules that are in place, because on one hand, we're trying to stop people from intensifying, which means that, whatever baseline that you've had, I hope the audience understand all this, but there was a baseline that was established, back in 2009, 2013, and whatever that baseline is for that piece of land, you can't exceed that after that. You can only come down. So that was the idea. This is how you can actually improve the fresh water, improve the water quality. But that baseline stays with the piece of land. So, as a vegetable grower, we need to be able to move to the next piece. But the next piece may have a lower baseline than what we've established in the original piece of land. And so some rules have kind of actually stopped that from happening. And this is kind of what I meant earlier, is that we actually need flexibility in the rules to allow us to do what we actually need to do.
I have a question.
I think it actually follows on from that as well. So maybe not so much just how do we understand it, but that next step, how do we get value from that understanding and that management of it? So particularly in the vegetables, Ellen maybe outlined a pretty simplistic equation, but I know for a fact that within horticulture and market gardens, managing irrigation and your soils is way more complex. It's probably I've been involved in all the different industries, except deer. And I have to say that market gardening is possibly the hardest, as far as if you had one soil type, which you won't have, even knowing the history of that, how do you manage it, how do you know the water holding capacity, and then you've got your crop factors on top and different rooting depths, always staggering it for supply as well, because you are supplying a fresh market. Pivots generally won't fit, so you end up in an all or nothing situation, where you either have bare minimum or you have to invest huge sums of money to have the top of the line technology to manage it the way that it needs to be managed. So for example, a system where you put in one soil moisture in the farm just to tick a box means nothing. So you either do it properly, in which case you probably need variable rate irrigation, because every part of your paddock, or even within one, unless you've got a 1.5 metre irrigator, it's going to have different requirements. So how do we get value? I think Ellen touched on the fact that supermarkets already require global gap or NZ gap. So what else have we got left to get this value? We say we're moving into a plant-based or probably alternative type proteins. What's the standard that they're going to have to reach, and where does that investment come from? Because that's an upfront cost to these farmers.
We have a lot of questions coming out of that. Would you mind just choosing one?
I guess it was more of a statement that it's definitely, this is a challenge we have, and my thing is, how do we get value from this, from horticulture?
Is it for me? Well, we don't actually have any say, to be honest. So the supermarkets actually, in the market, actually dictate the price. So at the moment, or I shouldn't say at the moment, but just about every single year there's an oversupply. And there's actually a lot of growers here growing just whatever they want. So I'm not sure how to answer your question, because really there's not a lot of value. I mean, the value that we get is probably from gains in efficiency, like the example that I gave you earlier, and also from scale. It's actually very, very difficult for small growers.
Imagine the food waste from harvest to market is extremely high as well.
It's also high once it gets to the market too. And so we're always mindful about that kind of stuff. So on one hand, let's go back to the plastic example that I used, right? So people want us to remove our plastic. I grow cucumbers, and we've had a few calls about removing the plastic. We've tried all sorts of things. We can put apple wax on it and tried it. It didn't work. It's still wilted. and it just goes floppy after about a day. If we don't put plastic on it, there'll be much greater waste. So, if you want numbers and stuff like that, I think the supermarkets reckon that we use about 180 kgs of plastic a year. And so greenhouse gas from that, about 2.9 tonnes or something like that, or about 3 tonnes. But the food waste, about 20% gets composted. But the food waste alone from all that is something like 160 tonnes. So do you want, a little bit of plastic here, or do you want massive amount of, greenhouse gas, due to waste? So it's always a compromise.
Can we breed smaller pumpkins with thinner skins? That would be great. We've got a question here.
Yeah, I have, and it's a follow-up. So we have a system that is intensified, and if we look at your system, Alan, you've expanded and you have a very intense system, which is growing agriculture. If we look at Synlait, they effectively established themselves by buying large tracts of dryland farm, putting irrigators on it, and milking cows, which once probably ran about 4 or 5 sheep to the hectare. So if intensification is the problem and we all have to run faster to stay the same, are we effectively seeing the end of the family farm and all that means to our society and the values we hold? Because as Juliet talks about, she talks about her farmers. Most of them would be multiple farm owners with 5 or 6 people on each farm. They have a head office which looks after all that stuff. Even Alan's business, a market gardener of 110 hectares, is a very, very big market gardener. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is the problems have been caused by intensifying corporates, yet the people that are going to suffer are going to be the family farms. I'd be interested on the comments from the panel.
You want me to start? Yeah, so I think, Stuart, it's exactly right. So it's very, very difficult now for small growers to survive. Now, if you're talking about, say, the compliance side of things, right, that's been kind of imposed on most farmers now, that's going to be about the same, doesn't matter what size you are. So when I talk to other growers about it, they think they actually need a half a person, there to kind of just look after compliance and nothing but compliance, right? So it's not just the water stuff, it's actually the health and safety and all those other things that we have to meet. Record keeping, for all these audits that you have to have. So it's inevitable that farming is going to be corporatised. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Just to comment on it from our end, we have a proportion of supply that comes from corporate farms, but the vast majority of our supply comes from mum and dad family farms. And what we also are seeing as a trend is that larger corporates are taking cost-cutting measures to strip out administrative burden where compliance is concerned. And actually some smaller mum and dad, for want of a better term, operations have got more people with a more diverse skill set, and we're actually growing future managers on those operations with the ability to think more widely rather than being employed in a particular role for a particular health and safety duty that's then not transferable when they decide to move operations. So I think there's points on both sides, but I would like to think that we can, certainly from our end, we have a single treatment for everyone that supplies us milk, and we would like to see that those family operations remain sustainable and remain competitive in the industry, and it's our job to help and lead and guide them to being able to do that.
Can I just make one more comment about the intensification word as well? Because intensification, when you talk about dairy, is probably not quite the same. In my example earlier, I've kind of increased my planting spacing, or increased the planting density. I guess that's actually not, in my view, that's actually not intensification, because it would result in less leaching.
And I guess what scale gives you is the ability to react quickly when opportunities arise, because you can move things around, you can separate stuff, you can jump on opportunities because it's not requiring your entire operation to go there. And that's probably the advantage of that larger scale, but that's not necessarily corporate owned. That could be, large equity partnerships.
Have we got any more burning questions before I summarise down the back?
I'm just interested to know, Alan, how you feel about farming where you are, because Rolleston is on your back doorstep, and it keeps growing and growing. And I was at the Ahuriri Lagoon and Te Waihora yesterday with the regional committee, and Doc is doing some great work around weed control with willows and bits and pieces, but they said as climate change happens and the sea level starts to rise, we're going to see those areas encroach backwards and backwards into highly productive land areas that are used for, the likes of your operation. So I just want to know how you feel about that as a landowner.
Well, it kind of depends on where the sea's going to come up to. I might have a beachside property, so who knows? It might be worth a lot by then. But where I am, though, it's actually really close to population centres, so that's kind of ideally where I want to be. And I couldn't really kind of go anywhere else either. If I move away from where I am, it actually takes a long time to get to know the soils and the climatic conditions.
I was going to ask another question, but I'm realising how far over we are of time. I'd like to ask the panellists to summarise for me in a short paragraph how do you think that we could actually harness our strengths within the industry to position our future globally? I'm just trying to leave on a positive note.
I could go first if you like, I'm at the end. I think it's all down to collaboration. I mean, it's been mentioned already, but if we try and take the competitive advantage route, we're going to fail miserably. And so we have to be thinking cross-sector, not within dairy or within sheep and beef or within cropping. Integrated farm systems, I think, is where it's heading. So the sooner we can start talking to each other and sharing information and actually making a conscious effort to build models which are, cross-sector, the stronger position we'll be in for tackling the future.
Just what she said. No, but just on that, I mean, exactly that, Julia, I think. But also, I think we need to think a little bit differently about land, in my mind, in terms of how we manage our land, or perhaps how we actually manage the land across multiple owners. I do think that that's a thing that needs to come into these discussions. How can what I do complement what you do, and how can we work together, whether that's through a lease or whether that's through some, hand-holding, I don't know. But, there's got to be a bit of that.
So I agree with the comment about collaboration, but I'm a little bit more pessimistic because I've been in the collaborative process probably for about 5-6 years now, and I've got my role in central government as well. And I have to say there's actually a total lack of trust. Even between sectors, like what dairy wants, what beef and lamb wants, what the horticulture sector wants. I think everyone's actually just kind of looking out for their own, which is just not great. Really, I think there's got to be a lot more give and take so that we can actually build trust.
It's an excellent way to finish off. And what I've taken from today's discussion is it's about the right product in the right place. Whilst our 50 Shades are at Wellington today. Can I please have a round of applause to our wonderful panellists and all your insights? So I take this final opportunity to thank the Blink crew, Victoria, Katie and Caroline, for your awesome event management of today. And thank you so much for all attending and sitting through, some of you both, seminars. So go well and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you so much.